solar mini-grids have turned from small pilots to an electrification wave. We were there when mini-grid regulation was established. When financial transactions were closed, we saw new technology thrive and companies fail. This is where we tell the stories. This is where we discuss the future. The mini-grid business, powered by INENSUS.
Hello, Vanessa.
Hi, Nico.
We're talking about Electrify, the mini-grid business game, which INENSUS developed. And I think we should start with where we're coming from. We saw over the last few years that there's a lack of kind of high potential, high quality staff in the sector. And we believe that we need to attract more high potentials. Excellent African entrepreneurs, excellent university graduates to fill roles in the mini-grid companies' management levels.
Yes, that's true, Nico. We notice in the sector that there is an abundance of international professionals, and we ask ourselves, where are all the African potentials? We need to see more of them.
And my perception is that these high potentials graduating from universities or young professionals, they look at the sector and say, well, there's no money to be made there. I don't want to go into a sector that is just after impact. I want to go somewhere where I can make a living. I want to go somewhere where there's good opportunity for a highly paid career. And at the moment, the mini-grid sector doesn't look like that. We need to change it. And I believe that there is potential in the mini-grid sector to meet that demand.
Absolutely.
And this is why we said we need a tool to communicate what potential there is in the mini-grid sector. We need to show people within the shortest time frame they have, give them a deep insight into what the mini-grid sector and what mini-grid companies are all about. And here it is, Electrify the mini-grid business game. That's what we developed. So that is one thing, right? And then another is regulators. Regulators, governments, ministries of energy. They often have an understanding of the mini-grid sector and mini-grid companies that is not quite realistic. Just because they have never acted as a mini-grid company CEO, they have never actually experienced what the challenges are like.
Yeah, we also often see in the sector that they want to provide smaller tariffs, thinking that people living in the communities do not really have the ability to pay. So there is a mismatch in understanding between the government's perspective and the mini-grid operators.
Yes, and at the same time, if they increase the tariffs a little bit, mini-grid companies could be profitable. Mini-grid companies under this profitability could then acquire additional finance. And this additional finance would help them expand mini-grid electrification and mini-grid rollout across the country very fast. But smaller tariffs actually retard the whole expansion. And then there's a third group, which has probably some misperceptions about mini-grids, and that is financiers and investors. Well, oftentimes, financiers and investors don't understand the mini-grid sector the way they should to invest into a company. Of course, they can look into financial models and plans and everything, and they can look into historic data and so on, but all that data doesn't show them what decisions need to be taken, what they need to look for in a mini-grid CEO, what the right villages to be selected may look like. And that is exactly what we now want to change with this game. And we want all these three sector stakeholder groups to play this game and learn about the mini-grid sector and understand. And we hope that this will, after all, trigger communication, conversations between these groups that will be beneficial to the sector and help the sector grow. So now, Vanessa, what is Electrify the mini-grid business game all about?
Electrify is a simulation of a mini-grid company where the player actually gets a chance to step into the shoes of a mini grid CEO and gets to take all the decisions that affects the community, such as selecting tariff levels, digitizing the activities, acquiring equity and debt. And the main goal is for the player to have the highest value of shares at the end of the game and make its mini grid company profitable.
Yeah, it's difficult to explain in a podcast without video what a video game may actually feel and look like. But let's try, right, Vanessa? Like, we've played a lot, and this game is basically on maximizing the profitability of your mini grid company, right, as a player. There is a share value calculation based on the profitability of the company. And the more profitable you are, the more profit you make, the higher your share value. You can take decisions as a CEO on many things. And all these can make or break your company. One individual wrong decision can basically run you into bankruptcy. Then the game is over.
Over.
Yeah, exactly. So what decisions should we mention here that a mini grid company player should take?
Well, there are important factors to consider. One is site selection. Like, we need to consider sites that are closer to major hubs to have the highest number of PUEs that would then be able to consume electricity during daytime and also have fixed revenues, also would potentially boost income within the community. And then we can have like a good overview of revenue growth.
Yeah, exactly. And you can take decisions on digitization. Do you want to go for smart meters? Do you want to go for prepaid meters? Do you want to go for remote monitoring? Do you want to introduce a ticketing system for customer service? All these kind of things. You need to take decisions on your number of staff. And I think that is one of the aspects that many mini grid companies struggle with, because they do both. They do construction and implementation of new mini grids and mini grid operation at the same time in the same company under the same management, and usually with the same staff. So therefore, they design their staff size and number for the construction times. But when construction is over, basically, what do they do with their staff, right? Oftentimes, they just keep the staff, but that reduces their profitability. And with that reduced profitability, they cannot convince investors to invest and provide the finance they need to scale faster. So therefore, staff management and staff level management is one of the core features here in this game. But there are many more. You set tariffs, PUE tariffs and residential tariffs, and you acquire equity and debt. Equity and debt is available only once you can show that you can run a profitable company. If you're unprofitable, then, well, no chance to actually acquire any finance. Like in real life, there is interim finance available for grants. So grants come usually as performance-based grants ex post, like results-based funding or results-based finance. And in the meantime, you can pre-finance that grant to a certain extent. Then you can size your systems, right? You can say, I want a renewable fraction of 100%, or I want a renewable fraction of 70, 50%, whatever, meeting the remaining demand with diesel. And that brings us to all the assumptions. Let me quickly run through the assumptions, and then you can also come in, Vanessa, and explain other assumptions. So, for example, we are taking care of foreign exchange risk, diesel price development over time, price elasticity of demand when it comes to tariff setting. We consider economies of scale. So if you import larger numbers and deploy larger numbers of systems, your specific price of the individual component gets reduced. We have impacts of digitization on staff requirements. We consider customer satisfaction. So if electricity customers are unsatisfied because your staff level is too low, or your system doesn't deliver electricity reliably because the system is too small or whatever, then the willingness to pay, and your revenue, after all, will go down. We'll calculate the average revenue per user on a continuous basis. And we basically simulate the whole game over 20 years, like the whole mini-grid company over 20 years. And those that have the highest share value in their company will rank highest on the leaderboard, right? And we have seen players who actually turned $1 million of starting capital into $100 million, $300 million over 20 years. Well, this shows that the mini-grid business could potentially be profitable.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very interesting game to play, since you get to see how your decision making affects your profitability in real time. And you've already mentioned a few of the assumptions we make in the game. And I wanted to just jump back on the relationship between the number of staff and the digitization, because I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, since we can also see in real time in the game how digitization, like adopting ticketing, for example, would help reduce the amount of staff by a certain percentage. So these additions, I would say, that a mini-grid company could adopt that would, on the long run, reduce its OPEX.
Exactly. Yeah, and another effect that I have not mentioned yet is clustering of sites. Like if you select sites all across the country, then your travel costs will be very high. We calculate travel costs.
Yeah.
Meaning that your profitability is probably lower. If you cluster properly, if you select large sites, if you select sites that are close to trade hubs, your demand, electricity demand will increase, your ARPU will increase quite rapidly. Mm-hmm. That will help you become profitable. Wise selection of sites is definitely the core of any mini-grid company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I agree. Also, for the sites, the data used from VIDA, so the sites actually have their own characteristics. You see the wealth indication, for example, you mentioned the distance to a trade hub and all of this. So as a player, you kind of already have a feel of what the site could be like, how maybe profitable in terms of number of connections, in terms of the demand overall per year that the site would consume. And also you mentioned the renewable energy fractions, where you get to choose if you want more diesel, if you want more renewable energies, if you want to oversize your system to account for potential growth. All of this, you can see how it affects your investment, it affects your system size. And also talking about diesel, like we have fluctuating prices of diesel overall during the simulation time, so the 20-year simulation time. And you also see how the rise and fall in diesel, if you have a highest share of diesel, would then affect your overall profitability.
Yeah, exactly. And what we need to say is that this game is currently simulating using the Nigerian data. If you go there, you will see a map of Nigeria with thousands of dots. And each of these dots is an actually unelectrified village. And that makes it most exciting from my point of view, because it's not some artificial game where you play in an artificial environment. It's basically real data that you're playing with. It is actual village data, and we try to keep it as close as possible to reality. We are using the data from the DARIS planning activities that we had supported earlier, a few years back, and we now converted it into this game. Well, similar data is available nowadays for other countries also. And the main player here is, of course, VIDA, which collects all these data. And thanks a lot to VIDA, we can use this data for our game. So yeah, it's almost like in real life.
Yeah, almost, yeah.
Vanessa, let's look into the use cases of the game a little bit more closely. So we already talked about the 3 types of user groups that we foresee. On the one hand, the regulators and policymakers. On the other hand, the entrepreneurs and graduates from university. And the third is investors and financiers. And I would say the fourth is, after all, the mini-grid companies themselves. Let's start with the mini-grid companies themselves, and then maybe we can come back to the other three. So mini-grid companies nowadays actually train their management staff on the job. You hire a person, and there is not much experience in mini-grid management in the talent market. You basically just onboard that person and give him exposure to the challenges while he's actually taking decisions, which may not be such a good idea in the long run. Maybe it's better to provide some upfront training. And now with this simulation that we developed, any mini-grid company could just pick a talent, expose her or him to the game, tell that person, play. If you're unsuccessful, come back to me. Ask me questions why you're not succeeding. I will tell you how to improve. And then step by step, make that talent understand what it actually takes to run a mini-grid company successfully. So I believe that this could change the way staff training is happening in mini-grid companies.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you, Nico. Also, because the game gives you the opportunity to actually lose. And by that, I mean that we know that when we're playing a game, we always want to have the highest possible score. But in real life, we know that we might be confronted to unforeseen circumstances. So, for example, by selecting the community with the highest number of customers, you are sure that you have a substantial demand. Whereas you could also decide to test what happens if you select a community with a low number of customers and try to play around with the parameters to eventually see how far you can go with this community, if you can eventually make it profitable at some point or not. And if you can't, what are other things to play around with? So it's not just about winning the game or playing the game for the pleasure of it. It's also a learning experience to know what to do when things don't really align with how you want them to go. So.
Yeah, that's very nice indeed. And what we have to say here is that in this simulation of the Nigerian mini-grid market, not only metrogrid strategies can be successful. The Nigeria DARIS program provides higher ground levels for smaller villages. And that makes smaller villages also financially feasible to a certain extent. But of course, we must admit that metrogrid strategies are always the most profitable ones. But yeah, you can try this out, you could test it and then see. And also for investors, this can be an opportunity to see what strategies they want to promote. Do they want to go more for impact-driven electrification? Do they want to go more for profit-driven electrification? What is their strategy? What risks are they actually taking? And which companies do they want to work with? They can find out for themselves by playing this game, learning more about how the sector works.
Yeah, exactly. And also having an idea probably of the types of investments and subsidies that would be required to electrify either one or the other communities, where one is impact driven or one is business driven. So yeah, that gives a good overview.
After all, the aim would be to create or improve the investor confidence.
Yeah.
To make sure that investors know what they're actually investing in, which at the moment may not be the case in all cases. So, all right, now we've talked about mini-grid companies as players or company staff as players. We've talked about graduates a lot, and we talked about investors and financiers. Now, let's touch upon policy and regulation a little bit and how regulators and policymakers can benefit from this game.
Yeah. Government and policy regulators are not usually aware of the realities of the terrain, if I can put it that way, of the environment. And there is quite a mismatch between what they expect as regulators and what mini grid operators actually experience on ground. So playing this game, which is, as we mentioned, based on real data and can actually simulate real life events, can help regulators and government entities understand actually the realities from an operator's point of view. And things like tariff settings, which are usually on the lower end and make it harder for the operators to actually reach break even, could then be pushed a little bit higher without affecting too much the customers and still making the mini grid business profitable while keeping good customer satisfaction.
Yeah, and there is still a subject that people think they know, but oftentimes they don't really factor in the effects of price elasticity of demand. And I think this is another unique opportunity here to really experience what price elasticity of demand actually means. Like, what does it mean if you increase your tariff for residential customers? What does it mean to increase your tariff for productive users? What does it mean to increase your tariff for productive users beyond a level where diesel or petrol generators could generate electricity at similar cost, even at lower cost? What does it mean to increase tariff levels to a range where the solar home system may be more affordable? These kind of things can be experienced here in this mini grid game because we put the assumptions from all our learnings over the last 20 years into this, and seeing how it all plays out and how one aspect affects the other is actually a learning experience, even for me, right? When playing the game, I thought, okay, wow, where is this effect coming from now? Where is it coming from? And in some cases, I even needed to think some minutes about, okay, why did I lose? What happened? And then after a few minutes, I said, okay, well, it was, I don't know, price elasticity, or it was too much or not enough staff, or it was a digitization decision that I took wrongly, or it was the selection of sites, or it was simply taking the wrong finance at the wrong point in time. Like, there's so many mistakes you can make as a mini grid company CEO. But yeah, you can learn how to overcome and to avoid these mistakes with this game.
Yeah.
Good. Now, recently we've talked to the World Bank SMAP, AFDB CEFA, and GetPro, which is running Get Invest and Get Transform. And they all really like the idea of this game, and they like the game itself, and they like playing it, and they like the opportunities that this game brings along. And they said they would love to support it and make it something that people actually use to the benefit of the sector. And one of the ideas that were discussed was to run a competition between players. And there may be several groups, maybe a group for professionals from mini grid companies. There may be a group for university graduates and entrepreneurs that are new to the sector. There may be a group for government and regulators, and there may be a group for investors and financiers. And each of these groups may play with their respective perspective, and maybe even we come forward with some group-specific challenges that these groups may need to perform. And then after all, we will find those who perform best, and those best performing players may potentially get a prize of whatever that may be, service from Get Invest or from AMAP 2.0, or some support for policymakers through SMAP or something like that. Let's see. That has not been decided yet. We're all thinking about it. We're brainstorming still. But it's very likely that something like this will be developed. And to all our listeners, get prepared. Maybe you want to take part in that competition.
Yeah, it would even be interesting to have a group with all three sectors playing together and seeing how each decision that it decides to make affects the overall result.
Indeed. Yeah. Very cool idea. All right. With that outlook, let's jump into some recordings from an INENSUS internal electrify battle.
Okay, once I get the drum, yeah.
Are you learning? I mean, I'm learning a lot from the side.
You're going bankrupt. You're going bankrupt. Silva, you're going bankrupt.
Yeah, what shall I do?
Well, at the moment, there's no option anymore.
What? So I'm gonna pause the game until someone else crashed before me.
Thanks, Cameron, because I've been bankrupt already 3 times, so...
Without telling us.
Yes.
Without telling us.
I apply.
So now I see Emma.
Yo,
You are cash flow positive. Congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah, and
900 connections.
You got an equity and debt offer. What are you taking?
Okay, so if I look at the offer,
Whoa, Pinto, what you're doing? $57 per kilowatt hour for productive users. That's crazy.
that's what I charge.
Giving not 100% customer service, but up to 80% customer satisfaction.
All right, all right.
If the customers are paying, hey,
Who cares?
who cares?
There's no regulator here.
Wow, Holger has a supercluster developed
Sokoto.
around Sokoto. Yeah. 13 connections, 6,000. Yeah, but all small towns, all small villages. Jacob is cashing in grants. Is that a good strategy, Jakob?
For now, yes. Let's see. Let's see how sustainable it will be.
Oh, 24 cents per kilowatt hour for households. That's very kind of you.
Yeah, I'm a very social man.
Now, you have got debt offers, Tiptoe.
Yeah.
Does that sound attractive to you?
It's a bit too, the interest rate is a bit too high. The Nigerian one is only 5 years. So I'm thinking if I should accept that or not.
To fire some people.
You had to fire some people. So customer satisfaction is going down,
But the-
revenue is even further going down.
But the cash flow is not going up. Yeah, it's going up.
And also I would
Bankruptcy, 3 months to recover. Okay.
What's your thinking?
Wow, Jakob, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 villages under construction and your bank account is at bankrupt.
I'll try.
Emma, if you
Yeah,
were
yeah,
a banker,
yeah.
would you give a loan to someone who has a negative cash flow?
Of course not.
All right. Oh, Thomas, game over. Oh, what went wrong, Thomas?
I think I got impatient and spent too much money.
Yeah, impatience is never good. Now, Holger, you're starting again?
Yes, so Sokoto is challenging.
Sokoto is indeed very challenging. Game complete. Now you can put your name.
Yeah, I did it.
This episode of the Mini Grid Business has been brought to you by INENSUS, your one-stop shop for sustainable mini grids. For more information on how to make mini grids work, visit our website, INENSUS.com, or contact us through the links in the show notes. The Mini Grid Business, powered by INENSUS.